In this video, I'll be taking you along for a drive in my 2019 6.7 PowerStroke to show you the fuel economy improvements I've gotten after fixing the exhaust and tuning the truck. Now, I did take out the Freedom camper from my bed, so right now I just have a bike on the back and I probably have about 500 to 600 pounds in the bed with the deck system and my tools and stuff. So the truck does have some weight, but there is no additional wind resistance over stock. And I've had a lot of folks asking this, but since I fixed the exhaust, I've been running 130 horse file. So that means I'm adding 130 horsepower to what the stock configuration is. So my truck, I have kind of a guesstimate for what it's at for power now. I dynoed it with the exact same tire and wheel setup this last winter in Denver. And the uncorrected horsepower was about 380. So at the wheels, right? At the rear wheels. So if I'm adding 130 to that, you can assume that I'm making somewhere close to 510 wheel horsepower, which is crazy for a truck that, you know, has an intake system and just a file is crazy. I did get a 5-pack of tunes, so I do have a 230 horse file, and I don't think I'm gonna run that super hot file because I don't really want to spin my crank gear. I've heard that happens because there's no keyway or pin and on the gear, and so yeah, I mean, I really like this setup because the fuel economy is great. On the highway, I get about 20 to 21 average without the camper in the back. With the camper in the back, it's 17.5. So the wind resistance definitely whacks several miles per gallon off, which is crazy because, you know, the Freedom camper only weighs about 200 pounds. So, and you'll have to excuse my steering wheel being cockeyed. I had my brother, when he was out here visiting, swap out the upper heim joint that wore out on my PMF track bar. And so when we did that, I think maybe it was like half a turn, not the same as it was before. And you can kind of see what I'm getting. I mean, like 18.6 is kind of the around town average. And you know, you're not really gonna get better. Like if you're just all in stop and go traffic, you're definitely not going to do better than like 17 or 18 average. Now I still do a lot of highway driving, so that definitely is a factor. But I would say for sure with a tune, you're not gonna get very good fuel economy in the city and stop and go driving. That's just how it works. But you know, if you're smart and you have one of these trucks, you don't really do a lot of stop and go driving. You're trying to hit mostly highway anyway. So that's really what I care about when I look at fuel economy. It's like, all right, you know, I drive around town some, but the average speed of this vehicle since I purchased it, well, and since its inception, since it was born in the factory, is 40 miles an hour. So that is the average speed if you take the total miles to 29 and divide that by the engine hours. You know, this is a highway truck. All right, so I'm gonna reset this for our trip up, and I'll check in with you after a few miles here. I mean, this is kind of showing the instant, so the other thing I can do is I'll reset my trip to as well, so you can see over a certain number of miles. You know, obviously this particular clock for fuel economy isn't super accurate. You know, I am well aware I could probably do this calculation out, but I'm just going to show you what the Ford computer says, and then, you know, maybe at a later date I'll do a test where I actually fill up and then drive and then calculate at the pump, you know, what I actually got for fuel economy. And this road, the speed limit is between 60 and 70 pretty much the whole way up to Bellingham. It's like there's some lower speeds in there, and then it changes to 70 when you get to closer to Bellingham, like into the Skagit Valley. You can see I got my Banks iDash over here, which has been really handy. Right now, I have fuel rail pressure, which is the actual. I have engine oil temperature, engine coolant temperature, transmission temperature, boost pressure, and then I have fuel rail temperature, and eventually I'm gonna change that one, I think, to EGTs once I get my EGT sensor sorted, but that'll be nice to have for sure. But yeah, I mean, the truck runs ridiculously smooth. Transmission shifts smooth. You know, I mean, it pretty much just sits in 6th gear unless I'm doing hills and stuff, and then I usually drop down. Now, one of the things that's kind of counterintuitive with running a hotter tune file, so, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you run a hotter tune, it's more fuel, it's more soot. It actually gets you better fuel economy because they're not just turning up the fuel, especially if it's a good tuner. They're actually also going to be advancing your timing slightly. And so if you advance your timing, you do get better fuel economy. And that was something I didn't fully understand about running a hotter tune file. I do have a 30 horse tow tune and a 75 horse tow tune file. And so, you know, if I ever get back into towing campers, I would probably flash down to that. I am just flashing in the tunes as I need them. I don't have shift on the fly, or switch on the fly tuning, excuse me. I just, you know, don't really need it, and I don't want to mess with my transmission's adaptive learn table like that. And again, it's, you know, this truck is a work truck. I mean, I want it to perform really well and to be fun to drive, but at the end of the day, I'm also not trying to flash into a 230 horse file and race a, you know, a Civic at a stoplight. The temps I've been running are pretty solid. I mean, I towed a trailer up the Eisenhower Tunnel Hill from both sides on I-70, both westbound and eastbound, and you know, I got a pretty hot oil temp. It was like 230 degrees, but like that still, according to Ford, is like you're just working the truck, like it's nothing to really be alarmed about. So that was also pretty cool for the 130 horse file, and it just works good because it's a hotter file, so I get way better fuel economy. You know, like towing, it was the difference between getting like 15 miles per gallon with a camper in the bed and towing a trailer versus getting like 13 miles per gallon, which again, 2 miles per gallon doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're driving 6,000 miles a month, it really adds up. And then now, especially, you know, I'm getting, you know, my average is right around 21 for this drive since I've been filming this video, you know, since I reset it on the highway. And, you know, it's like, what am I doing, 65, you know, and it's getting like 22 miles per gallon, which in a truck of this size is ridiculous. You know, it's a 8,000 pound truck. The other thing that's really cool about then getting, you know, 20 miles per gallon in this truck is I also have a 60 gallon tank. So even when I was towing, I was finding I was getting 800 miles between fill-ups, and if I'm running this thing completely empty, you're gonna get 1,000 miles between fill-ups, which means I could go from here all the way to the East Coast, and I could do that on like 3 to 4 fill-ups if I'm not towing something, right? If you're towing something, you're probably gonna do it in like 5 to 6 fill-ups, but that's really crazy. I definitely notice that the fuel economy does go down as soon as you go over 70. So at the end of the day, I'm still driving a box on wheels, and you know, it's you know, you're not gonna cheat the system by tuning your truck and then driving 80. Like, you're still just gonna get piss poor fuel economy. But if you tune your truck and drive 65 or 70, the difference will be huge. All right, here's where we're at right now. Again, been driving for a little bit. Purely highway, again, with nothing in the bed. So realistically, if I have the camper in, we're probably doing closer to 17 and a half. And if I'm towing the trailer, we're doing about 15. So like, I drove from Washington to Florida to New Hampshire to Denver and then back to Washington. And my average for that whole trip, I was towing a trailer for the whole trip and had my camper in for the whole trip, it was 15 miles per gallon. Even though my truck is tuned now, I'm still running Arch Oil AR6500 every fill up. So, you know, I think a lot of this is just that the engine itself is in really good repair. My fuel pump is in really good condition. You know, per my oil analysis, everything is working well. And a large part of that, I think, is I'm just able to, you know, and I constantly have good fuel in the truck by running the Arch Oil. Get the cetane, get the detergents, get the lubricity. It's like those are like the top 3 things that we don't have in ultra low sulfur diesel that you need. So if you want to buy some, you know, they still sponsor my channel, and you can use the code PSM10, and that will get you 10% off your entire order at archoil.com. I probably should have noted this sooner too, but this is what I'm running for tire pressure. So typically my cold inflate is between 45 and 50 psi. It's been cooler lately, so I need to add some air to my tires. I typically try to do 50 psi cold inflate, but this is, you know, my tires are right at about 50 psi currently. All right, so I just got to my destination. Here's what we got, over 72 miles. Again, mix of driving, you know, between 60 and 70 miles an hour. Yeah, that's fuel economy with 130 horsepower, 50 psi on the 295/70 R18s.